It's so lovely to be with you all. Thanks for joining us. I recognize it's a Friday at the end of June, so you'd probably all rather be on the beach with a pina colada. I'm seeing some nods already. So I just want to acknowledge that. If you just want to put your feet up and listen, I fully respect it. I also recognize some names that are here. So welcome. I'm just so glad to be with you. And for the folks that I know and the folks that I'm getting to know, my name is Carrie Jones Fonsbeck. I'm the executive director with Trauma Informed Utah. It is my greatest gift to do this work with folks that are on the front lines and just humaning and trying to lead people through humaning every day. And so I'm just really grateful to be with you. I do want this to be a little interactive. My goal is just to pour in a little bit to you, not to add to your to-do list, but hopefully also just perhaps a little bit of a perspective shift in terms of how we're approaching resilience, both for ourselves and for the folks that we're trying to serve and for the organizations in which we inhabit. Um, and so let's get to it. We always start at Trauma Informed Utah workshops with this framework around regulating, relating, and reasoning. This comes from Dr. Bruce Perry, right? So how are we regulating in the moment? I just want to invite any of you at any moment to ground yourself in the space in which, in a manner in which makes sense to you and that you need to do. If that's deep breathing or engaging your senses or pacing or curling up under your desk, like whatever works for you. I respect it. Hopefully, today's topics won't be too triggering, but self-reflective. And that can be, we never quite know when things are going to come up for us. So do what you need to do. I do just want to share a little bit more about myself and what brought me into this work. Because this is one of those things that I don't know how often we come back to our why, right? My why, your why are we in this work? Um, how often do we revisit that story? How often do we tell that story out loud? This is a mark of resilience to be able to share that story with regularity. And so I just wanted to share just a little bit in the spirit of kind of introducing myself. When I was in the third grade, I read The Hiding Place for the first time, Corey Ten Boom. I don't know if any of you have read that. And it was opened up my eyes to the idea of the Holocaust and of the fact that there were children in the world that had what they needed, and there were children in the world that didn't. And I that didn't seem fair to me, and I wanted to sort of explore that and understand that. So I started to tell people that I wanted to be a child psychologist. I'm not even really sure I knew what that meant at the age of 8, but I started down this path, entered college through Utah State, go Aggies, with psychology as my perspective, but then through an intro to social work class, that seemed like a better fit for me. That kind of systems theory with person in place and the fact that it's not just what's going on in our brain, it's also like how we're interacting. And so that leads me to this is a picture that's me on the right with my fabulous like 90s fleece vests. Does anybody have those back in the back of their closets anywhere? This is a group of young women from Israel and Palestine. And I worked for an organization called Seeking Common Ground during and after graduate school that would bring young women from the Middle East over to the mountains of Colorado. And we had these 3 week long camps, and we taught them this. It was actually a marriage therapy modality that was around mirroring and sort of hearing another story. And it was really deep, kind of clinical work, and also just really deep relationship driven work. And I will never forget sitting in a circle with these young women in the summer of 2000. The Actually, excuse me, it was 2001. The Intifada had just broken out during that time, which meant that there was heavy violence happening in the streets, and they did not know whom among family or friends were safe or unsafe. And here they were, literally thousands of miles away from home. And so they were scared and emotional, and we were coming together in our circle and trying to practice the techniques in which we'd been preaching and coming together. And there was these two girls sort of going back and forth. And one of them finally just said, "What do you want? What is it that you want from me? Like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do with this? What is it that you want?" And the other girl, who was from Gaza, came forward with a handful of newspaper clippings that on them had pictures of bodies in the street and deceased people and violence and blood. And she sort of threw this stack of pictures in the middle of the circle and said, "Do you know what I want? I want to know what it's like to feel safe for 5 minutes." And that has always stuck with me, right? This idea of safe places, safe systems, safe communities, safe people. And so, even though that was early in my career, I was so grateful for it because it has always just guided me in the way that I am hoping to approach my work and the why that both brought me here and understanding the inequity that exists across the world and that keeps me here. And I also have to acknowledge that my why also includes these two little humans, personalities, full display. This is Grace and Hollis, though this picture was a few years ago. Because if I'm really thinking about safe spaces, then this is about my kids, and safe spaces for them. And what does that mean for them? And even though my work keeps me from them sometimes, that hopefully I'm working towards a space that's better for them. And that's hard to see sometimes, right? It's hard to sort of see their future and acknowledge what that may look like. So this is my why. And there are times in my career that I have had to tell myself this story with intention because I forgot, or it got hard or overwhelming, and I didn't quite know why I was still here, what on earth was keeping me from these babies, right? And so I ask you that question. I'm wondering when the last time was you told this story for yourself, either to yourself or to somebody else. What brought you here and what keeps you here? Because if we're being honest, like, Target's hiring, right? So and for probably not that much different than what we're making if we're really being honest. And so being intentional about telling that story is a mark of resilience. So to kick us off today, I want to invite you to tell that story. We're going to put you in some small groups of probably 2 to 3 folks, and I just want to give you a minute or two each. So let's go like 5 minutes, Erin. Um, and just invite you to tell your story. Introduce yourself because these folks might be new for you for the first time, and tell your story, and then we'll come back together. Thanks. I appreciate all of you that participated. So thank you in indulging us. There is a reason that we tell these stories. Somebody commented like this is inspirational. We need to hear ourselves say them. We need to hear each other say them. Because I don't know about you all, but I've certainly had those times where I don't know why I'm still here. It doesn't feel like I'm making a difference, right? So thank you for sharing. My goal for you too is to take this information back to, or to take that question just back to your organization and talk about it with your teams. That's something. Oh, great. Thanks. So let's keep going. We want to have a reason today. I love this quote by Valerie Kaur. The way we make change is just as important as the change that we make. We're talking about the pathway. We're talking about the way, right? The way in which we each show up. We're doing human work. Not one of us is a widget in a factory or making widgets in a factory. We're doing human work. So it requires our humanity. And sometimes that's challenged, both because we're human and because this work is challenging sometimes. And so we have to pay attention not just to the destination or the hope that we came in the door with, but the pathway, the way we go about this. This is the reason for our conversation today. We want to have a discussion around resilience. And I love this definition that resilience is the ability to return to being healthy and hopeful after bad things happen. Note that it doesn't say resilience is the ability to be healthy and hopeful, full stop. It actually says after hard things happen. This is one of the hardest lessons I had to learn as a mom, right? Which was if I wanted my kids to go through hard things, I had to let them go through hard things. I couldn't sort of be that buffer and that, to take over for them. We actually have to go through the hard to get to the other side. The bad news is we can't erase it. It's part of the lesson, it's part of the process. But the good news is we don't have to do it alone. We get to hold hands. And we're going to talk about that in a second. There are so many examples of this in nature. I took this picture couple months ago in Zion when we didn't know there would be a foot of snow on the ground. Um, and wonder how many of you have seen trees grow out of rock, right? It just seems like they're coming right through the rock. And I thought a lot about what it took for them to sort of arrive. Like, what were they pushing through? What were they pushing past? How long did that process take, right? What was that seeding look like? And that they didn't just make it to the other side, they're actually thriving. They're leaving. They're living on top of the rock. There are trees in the Uinta Mountains, or excuse me, in the Rocky Mountains called the lodgepole pine. And the root of this tree is that it has, or not the root, but the part of this tree is this pine cone that's covered in a resin that is only broken down by fire. It's a waterproof resin. You can't get through it otherwise. But it's fire, in fact, that impacts the pine cone to break it open, where the seedling then occurs. And once a fire moves through a forest and clears everything above it and opens up the canopy for the sunlight to come through, then the seedling is allowed to occur at the root of the forest of the floor, right? It actually happens, regrowth happens because of and after the fire. And there are other trees that do this as well. Resilience is when you bend with the wind but don't break in the storm. This idea that the tree has fallen but continues, again, continues to leaf. So I've already talked about parenting a couple of times. You might hear a couple of those examples. My son broke his femur at the age of 7 when skiing with his dad. Emergency surgery, the whole thing. Life flight. It was not an easy day. And at any moment, my husband or I would have traded places, right? It was worse to watch him go through it than it was to actually have gone through it ourselves. And what I didn't know at the time, but was actually a really beautiful lesson. Um, and let me just say too, it was so hard, not only kind of in the day, but in the moments, to follow, the days to follow. He was now in weight bearing for 8 weeks. We thought, his soccer career is over because at 7, like, isn't everyone going to the World Cup, right? But what came out the other side of that is this really beautiful gratitude for everyone and everything that spent any time with him, or the people that showed up for him in a really meaningful way with toys and puzzles and video games and all of the things. He came through it with this strong empathy for people in wheelchairs because he knew what it was to kind of navigate the world a little bit differently for that period of time. He was more grateful for time to play and to run around after what he had gone through. So there's examples all around us as a species of things that we go through that are hard, and we're still able to thrive. And that actually the thriving comes from the result of the hard thing. It is the result of the hard thing. So it's all around us in nature, but it's also part of what it means to be human. So let's name the hard thing first, and then we'll get to how do we thrive at the end of this, right? I want to just frame this around the concept of secondary traumatic stress. Um, and it's important that we define this clearly. So, secondary traumatic stress is the impact, right, that we feel from witnessing the trauma of others. And we're going to get more nuanced in that language, but that's generally what we're talking about. And it wasn't all that long ago. This was really in the 80s and 90s that we started to apply the science that smokers were actually having an impact on the people around them, not just on themselves, right? So smokers had lung problems, but then we started to realize that the people that lived in their home or drove around in their cars or in close proximity to had the same symptoms, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about secondary traumatic stress. There's a literal ability to be exposed to and inherit symptoms of trauma as we are in close proximity to. And I love this quote from Rachel Remen: the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. So again, a nature example is no matter how many times I take my kids hiking and they say, we'll play in the stream, but we won't get wet, mom, right? Like you're going to get wet. It's going to happen. I also will never forget sitting with my supervisor. I spent 20 years at the YWCA Utah, which is the largest domestic violence service provider in the state. I served in many different roles, but most of that time was in a chief program officer, a chief operating officer role. So I was overseeing operations for 225 residents, 150 staff members, all coming with daily crisis-driven experiences of trauma. And it was a lot. I know I don't have to explain that to you, but it was a lot to hold. And I will never forget going to my annual evaluation with my supervisor at the time. And I thought it would be fine. I wasn't magical or anything, but I wasn't expecting it to be horrible. And she led with, "Do you have any joy in your job?" And my reaction to that was like, oh crap, she can tell, right? Because I was in a period of time where I was so steeped in my own stuff around carrying around this trauma for our organization, for my staff members, for the clients that we were serving. And I wasn't doing the work to manage it for myself. And the organization wasn't doing the work to support me in managing it, which we're going to talk about, that it was showing. I didn't realize how visible it was. I knew I was struggling. I was exhausted. I didn't know how much other people could see. I was literally treading water, right? I was wet and everyone could see my wet clothes or could see and I didn't know. I wasn't aware. So I think it's important to sort of talk about the distinction of these different things because we often sort of conflate them all, and really we're talking about different things. So let's start on the right side. Compassion satisfaction is the goal. This is often what brought us here. It's that we know what we're doing. We're able to create meaningful and wonderful change. We do a great job. We show up with joy every day, right, in our work. And we're doing the thing that we showed up to do. That's the goal. Hopefully, we've visited there. Likely, we haven't lived there during our career. Burnout is perhaps that next phase, which relates to, some tiredness. I don't really want to go to work. Is it my presence really, helpful? I'm kind of tired. I just am feeling disconnected. I don't know that me being there is really helping. Am I doing the thing? What's important to distinguish here is that burnout can happen in any industry, right? So my husband works out at the Kennecott mine. He goes through periods of burnout where he's like, I don't really want to go to work. Is my presence really doing anything for work? Am I doing what I showed up to do? So burnout is kind of universal when we're talking about across industries. Vicarious trauma gets a little bit closer to our work, which is that kind of changes in how we think about it. This is the moment where I start to tell myself a story. Oh, this client, I can't believe they didn't show up again. Like they keep skipping my appointment and I don't really feel like I'm doing anything and they're not doing the work and, this isn't working. And we start to tell ourselves a story both about our clients that we're trying to reach and about ourselves and what it is that we're able to do. So this isn't necessarily yet about trauma symptoms for us. It's more on that sort of cognitive shift in terms of how we're approaching the work, how we're thinking about the work, how we're thinking about the clients, the judgment that may come. Then we move into compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue and secondary traumatic stress are often used interchangeably, though I like a distinction that Dr. Brian Miller shares, and I'll share that in just a second. But it's perhaps a less stigmatizing way to talk about secondary traumatic stress because compassion fatigue just feels nicer. Like we're just tired of caring, but if we can get past the tired, we're going to be fine, right? We sort of tell ourselves this story. But really, when we get to the point of secondary traumatic stress, we're talking about the presence of PTSD symptoms in ourselves. We are talking about sort of deep kind of mental health shifts for us as we engage in and approach our work. There have been 2 periods of time during my career where I have sought mental health care for my job. Now, at the time, I blamed them on my husband. Like I thought it was anybody else's problem. And it was my wonderful therapist who said back to me, it feels like if we can peel back the layers of work, that will be some of the root of this, right? And so it's important to understand that difference because each of them hold different symptoms. Each of them can be addressed by different interventions, but we do need to understand what it is we're talking about. I love this um, quote. I don't know how many of you know Dr. Brian Miller. He used to be over the children's programs for IHC, and he's written a lot about secondary traumatic stress. And I'm going to read this quote to you. The emotional work of treating trauma takes its own unique toll. This effect goes beyond the cost of caring. In fact, sometimes the demands of the job allow little space for caring. The intensity of the reactions in our clients, constant immersion in trauma imagery, insufficient resources, and lack of freedoms to do our jobs the way we would like. We might even be willing to trade the real source of job pressure for the problem of caring too much. Far from being drained by too much caring, we hunger for more time in that place of compassion that drew us to the field. The problem isn't too much caring. It is that there's so much pressure and too many distractions that we get there only too rarely. I imagine that part of your why was about caring. I cared about this group of people. I cared about this situation. I cared about this community. And so I wanted to show up. And I also know that a lot of us come to this with our own backstory, some of which was hard, some of which was um, the both stressful, steeped in adversity, and sometimes in trauma. We know what it felt like people when people showed up to help, and we know what it felt like when they didn't. And so we wanted to be those people, right? We knew how to do it, or we wanted to be able to show up for the people around us. There are risk factors for secondary traumatic stress that we need to name and understand for ourselves and for our colleagues. The first one is that personal trauma history. What's in my backstory that may be present, whether or not I'm aware of it, right? Am I working with a traumatized population? So, me, 20 years in the domestic violence field, I'm not going to lie, really shaped my view of the world. It shaped how I approached relationships when I was a young social worker and trying to date. It shaped, how I saw, um, how I approach things with my children in terms of trying to protect them from certain risk factors. Like it's shaped how I've seen the world. And that's directly related to the level of trauma in which the clients I was working with. How isolated are we in this work? Some of us are doing this work as individual clinicians. You may be doing it from home. Do you have a support system? What does that look like in terms of teams, clinical supervision, reflective supervision, et cetera? And we're going to talk more about that. But also just thinking about the isolation, for example, of COVID, right? We all just lived through that. And so now we uh we just immediately shifted to trying to do things online, and then everyone was doing it from home. Oh, and by the way, we were trying to parent and still, keep everybody in our house healthy. But we were doing it by ourselves. And I could no longer sit with my colleagues over lunch and like decompress or really go through the impact of the stress. Do we have lack of outside interest from work, or is work just the thing? Are we fueling ourselves in different ways? How overworked are we? How does our caseload feel? Anybody identify with those things? Give me a little emoji in the chat, right? Because that's very real in our industry. We are overcommitted and under-resourced for doing all of the things. That is very inherent. And so, how do we be mindful of that as one of our risk factors? What kind of experience do we have and training do we have to do what we needed to do? I don't know about you, but I've definitely shown up for a job and I got a few hours of orientation and training. And then it was like, good luck, call me if you have any questions, right? And then, oh, by the way, 6 or 8 months in, you're doing okay because you feel you've kind of figured it out. But then your supervisor leaves because of their own impacts of the work, and now you're in charge. And so, how many of us kind of moved into leadership roles or supervision roles too early in our career because we were maybe good at this thing, but didn't have enough support to do the other thing, right? So, we've got to pay attention to some of these risk factors for ourselves and for our colleagues. And there are signs and symptoms. Take a look at this list. And if anyone is brave enough to share in the chat, what of these ring true for you? Could be now, could be at some point in your career. I will just share that moment when my boss said, "Do you have any joy in your job?" I was exhausted. So I was just absolutely exhausted inside and outside of work. I was very happy to go home and lay on my couch with takeout and watch Netflix, right? I was, um, there was deliberate avoidance. So I was all too happy to cancel a meeting under the guise of something else. But it was like, oh, yeah, we don't need to meet about that. Like, I'll just hide in my office. I was going through the motions. But I also had that, a lot of people ask about this sense of grandiosity. And as I've explored that, I really like, oh, yeah, that's a little too close to home for me. It's the sense that only I can do all of the things, you guys, because I have to be the one that shows up, right? It's kind of that savior complex. Only I can. And I felt that for my staff because I knew that they were stressed and I didn't want them holding that kind of stress. And so it was like, well, I have to take on the thing. I have to take on the really hard clients. I have to take on all the work because only I can do, right? Anybody else in the chat? I just want to look at. Yes. Inability to empathize for sure. Lack of empathy. Could never do enough. Yes, we can never do enough. Keep them coming if there's any of these others that you guys see and feel.
Sorry, did you want anybody to respond verbally or just over the chat?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, sorry. I'm a crisis worker
Oh, sorry.
with Unit 8, and about 2 years ago, I was like struggling.
Yeah,
And I feel like most of these were pretty present, but
yeah.
the disassociation, like I swear, like every time I got off the call, it was like took 10 minutes for me to feel like I was back in my body.
Yes. And thank heavens you were kind of aware of that, right? Because so many times we go through crisis calls or situations and we just kind of have to keep going. It's like the next client is still at the door or the call is waiting. We can't always wait for that, right? Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. I see these other comments: deliberate avoidance, physical ailments, grandiosity. Yes, 100% at home and at work. It's like we or anybody else is the one that in all of your family and friends and everyone you've ever met is like you're the person that they call for. Do you have a referral for? And I'm both happy to do it and also like, can you use the Googles? Like, because there are other options here. Anybody else that want to come off chat or share more? So the first key here is being aware of where this is showing up for us. Again, where it's showed up in the past, perhaps where it's showing up in the present. That might be a bit of a hard acknowledgement, but we've got to be aware for ourselves. So now what? We know these things are hard. If you've been in the in this career, thanks for sharing. Yes, avoidance of personal and activities. Um, oh, the anger and cynicism. Whew, I feel that. Thank you for the vulnerability. It's so real. So if you've been in this field for any length of time, you've been a part of these conversations. This is not new, right? And this is often the point in the conversation where we start talking about self-care. And it's usually like some element of like lovely to-do list of all of the ways in which we need to show up, that we are doing or not doing. Have we made it our minute quota at the gym this week? Have we gotten up at 4 a.m. for our, morning skincare routine? I don't know about you all, but I have never looked like any of these people. My self-care has often showed up more like this, which is about way too much caffeine and a lot of um, binging television. And, it's just kind of scraping by or trying to find some time for myself in the middle of everything else while I'm trying to show up for everybody else. So it's this conversation around self care. And let me be clear. The conversation around self care is about ways in which we fuel ourselves to continue to show up. I am all for that. So, whatever works for you, if you are a runner, if you are a quilter, if you are a champion sleeper, if you are the biggest World Cup fan, you should call my son. Keep doing those things, right? We want to keep doing the things that fuel us in whatever way. And I want to suggest a few sort of shifts in this conversation because what's really important about this conversation is sort of two things. One is Self-care has become way too over commercialized, right? If we just buy the magical yoga pants or the face cream or the, $3,000 spa, then we will have achieved nirvana. And it's more about the thing that we're buying than tending to what's going on. So that's one. And the second thing is literally what it says on this paper, which is don't forget to take care of yourself, which means you alone are responsible for this action. Now, again, do the things that fuel you. That is necessary in the world. We've got to take care of ourselves, our bodies, our minds, all of those things. But the shift here in this conversation should be about um, how are we both individually and organizationally responsible for self-care? If we know that or for our staff well-being and our staff wellness, if we know that a byproduct of this work is our staff getting mental health symptoms, symptoms that rise to the level of kind of a mental health diagnosis because of the nature of their work, then we need our organizations to care as much about this as we do and to care as much about our well-being as we do. And that's less about, okay, go take a day off. Like you need to honor your time off, which again, I'm here for, like take your beach week. But it needs to be less about taking a day off and coming right back into a system that's broken, and more about paying attention to the framework in which we exist within these symptoms or within these systems, so that we can keep doing this work, so that our whys can continue to matter. So we're going to shift our perspective today just a little bit, perhaps, and maybe this is new thinking for some of you, maybe it's not. But shifting our perspective is a choice, right? Love that. So here's three things I want to propose to you. Number one, we are most responsible for addressing our own potential vicarious trauma and STS. I used both of them because both of them are significant impact on ourselves and on our work. And so we're going to try to address both of them. But we're most responsible for addressing our own. The reason that I say that is one, we are the only one that control our reality, right? So we do have to pay attention to ourselves and to what we need and to how to do that. And nobody else is going to care as much about that as we will, right? That's just the literal reality of it. But the second part of that is the ethical responsibility of doing this work means we don't have a choice. We could actually do harm if we are not tending to our own well-being. I shudder at some of the moments that I had that I perhaps wasn't my best, and I was still trying to show up for clients. And the effort was there, the intention was there. But there were times where I perhaps didn't give what was needed. And I have to take a look at that because I have responsibility in that. There's an ethical responsibility to addressing our own things, our own stuff. And the other part of that is if you're in any kind of leadership role, team lead role, organizational leadership role, you have to start with you. You have to start with you. I will also always remember sitting with one of my team members who said to me, he was the director of the shelter at the time, and I was his supervisor. And he said, Carrie, I'm really having a hard time like taking care of myself. What is it that you do to like, how do you do that? Give me some pointers, right? And I'm sitting at my desk and I'm eating fries and we're like, I'm having a conversation with him, obviously not fueling my body very well, haven't taken a break. Like I'm just sort of in go mode. And I looked at him and said, I don't. Like, herein lies the problem for me. And you know what he said back to me was, I need you to. Your team member, need you, my leader, to take care of yourself because you're showing me the path and you're giving me permission and you're normalizing that in our organization. The second shift is that the responsibility to address vicarious trauma and secondary traumatic stress belongs both to the individual and the organization, not just to me, not just to, that my organization has a good time away policy so that I can go get a break, but that we're trying to shift that from self-care means you take care of yourself outside of work so that you can keep showing up to work. We've got to shift that framework, that time, that definition of time and approach for how we think about that. And the third is that safe relationships at home and at work are prevention for an antidote to vicarious trauma and secondary traumatic stress. That peer support around this is necessary, absolutely necessary for our continued support. And that looks like safe supervision, quality relationships with our supervisor, intentional time for peers to be able to break down how this work feels with other people that know how to go through it. So let's go through these a little bit more. There are protective factors related to these things. So one is the knowledge of trauma theory. This is not an introduction to trauma informed practice and approach, but I imagine so many of you have participated in these before. The understanding that of the impact of trauma, right? We've got to have that as part of our foundational knowledge. What does ongoing training look like to fuel our competence and practice? Not just the 4 hour orientation you got when you walked in the door, but what does that ongoing look like? That there's an individual and organizational practice of emotional intelligence. We're going to talk about what that means in just a few moments. That there's social supports inside and outside of work. I have people in my corner that I can be honest with, that can be honest with me and say, do you have any joy in your job? Like, what's going on? I need you to take care of yourself. And it's not just accidental bumping into my bestie in the hallway and like, let's go out after work and complain about everything that's going wrong. It's here's what's going on for me and the impact of this work. Supervision and support is intentional, protected, fueled with best practice, the awareness of secondary traumatic stress, the signs and symptoms, the conversation that we're having today, and that sustained focus on one's own well being. So I just want to acknowledge that not one of us is waking up in the morning like, I'm going to do my worst today, right? Like, we're all holding a lot. You're here on a Friday afternoon on the end of June. So I just want to acknowledge that you're doing the best that you can and that I see you. And that my intention is not, again, to add to your to-do list, but to hopefully just a little bit of perspective shifting as we have this conversation. One thing is I've been leaning into learning around self-compassion by Dr. Neff, by Dr. Kristen Neff. And some of you may be aware of it. I'm just going to go through this quickly. The idea of self-kindness versus self-judgment. And, you know, the old adage is like, would you talk to your client the way that you talk to yourself, right? Would you talk to your best friend the way that you talk to yourself? But it really is that sort of tuning into like, what do I need? Where am I at today? Do I need some rest? Do I need some friends? Do I need a Diet Coke? Like, what do I need to be able to show up instead of like, I'm just over here dragging and I wish everyone would stop calling, you know? What does common humanity look like versus isolation? We are not in this alone, and we've got to intentionally act like we're not. We've got to intentionally bridge around our humanity. We've got to have spaces where we can say, I'm not at my best today. This is what support looks like for me. Can you step in over here while I lean in over here and I got your back next time? Right? Mindfulness versus over identification, which is really just that. Tune in. Where am I at? What do I need? Versus do I just define myself by my job? Am I my job? Or am I just another human on this journey with these other humans on this journey? And we're going to hold hands and we're going to do it together the best way we know how. But to be able to do that, I got to be human first for myself. I also love, so she says this, most people think of self compassion as soft and gentle, but self compassion can be fierce as well as tender. I love this breakdown because we don't always think about it this way. You know, tender self-compassion. I used to think about it just sort of like how do I talk to myself? Like, oh, I just need to be nicer to myself, like the voice in my head, right? But I like the distinction that she gives, which is really that tender self-compassion is about presence. How can I be with myself right now? What do I need to feel comforted or assured or reassured? And how can I offer myself that or ask for it? So really, it's just that sort of quietness, put down the phone, close the door. How can I be with myself right now? What does that 5 minutes look like? The distinction there is that fierce self-compassion that requires action. What do I actually need right now? I've got to do something. This isn't just about tuning in. Like something needs to happen for me to shift this energy. What do I need to do to help alleviate my suffering? And how do I advocate for myself? I had a moment last December where I fully crashed out, as the kids say. I was like trying to mom and do all the things in December that we try to do. I was, full-time work, like my parents were needing more of me. There was a lot going on. And I had a ton of anxiety. It's like I woke up with this level of anxiety that I don't know that I had experienced before. And it was just right here. And I couldn't shake it. My normal techniques of my deep breathing and my, journaling and I could not shake it. And I was about 3 days in where I thought, I've got to do something different. So I just said to my team, I'm unplugging today. I need some time. And thankfully, I had the privilege to do that. You don't always have those days, right? But really tried to tune in and like, what do I need right now? Okay, I've got to move my body. I haven't been doing that enough lately. And that really helps me process my anxiety. So I took a long walk. What do I need? I need to talk to this friend who I know is a really great mirror for me sometime. So I called her. We went to lunch, right? I took some time to just journal for a long time, not just like my 5 minutes, but like really kind of self-reflect. It required action. And this is the kind of thing that sometimes we are sort of waiting for that day off, like, oh, if I can only make it to the end of the month, I've got like every third Friday off and I can do it then, right? Sometimes we can't do that. We've got to stop, either be with or what do I need? What does action look like? And I love this idea of self-soothing versus self-care. Because again, self-care is like the destination, right? How do we want to feel when we're done? Like, I want my body to be well cared for. I want to have enough energy to keep up with my kids. Like, I want to take care of my mind. So I know going to therapy is a good tool for me, right? Like, moving my body, I don't love it, but I know like I need to do it for my long-term health. Like, that's how I want to feel in the end. But there's also the self-soothing in the moment. What is it that you do to disconnect between clients when you've had a particularly hard crisis call you were talking about a minute ago, Brooke? Do you just need a drink? Do you need a 5 minutes of your favorite song? Do you need to walk to the Maverick? Do you just need to walk around the block? What is it that I need in the moment? I'm not going to shove it down and wait until Saturday. But what does self-soothing look like on the regular? And yeah, I want to come. Yes, sometimes a good cry. I'm a big fan of a good cry. And if you can't get it out, find yourself a great movie. If anyone's got any recommendations, put them in the chat. That'll just help you cry. Anybody else? What is it that you need in the moment? What does self-soothing look like? I'd love to hear from a few folks. Paint, oh, love painting, photography, shopping. Same, same. Oh, we got some picture takers here. I love this. Reading. Isn't it interesting? I have so found that if I can get to the end of my day and I spend 30 minutes reading versus 30 minutes Netflixing, I feel so much more whole. Maybe it's a moral imperative. I don't know. Listening to your favorite song, talking to your besties, totally here for it. Farming. Oh my gosh, I want to come over. You make me some tomatoes, Derek. Um, Chick-fil-A. You are my people, Nicole. Thank you for that. I love it. These are great. These are great examples. So yeah, it is that. And again, what are the things that sort of fuel us for the long term? What are the things that we need right now? And we know from the brain science, the brain biology, that it is often our senses that can be triggering around a traumatic event or can be triggering our own PTSD around work. It is also the senses that can be calming. So it's that song. So we at the YWCA, we created something called the Take Five Plan, which was literally what are 5 things you could do in 5 minutes, sometimes where you're at, because you can't always leave the room full of 4-year-olds that you're watching, but sometimes you could take 5 minutes to yourself. And everybody kind of went through a worksheet to identify what those moments were for them. So mine are, I get a Diet Coke. That's my beverage of choice. I call my partner. I look at pictures of my kids on my phone. I do some deep breathing, or I listen to ocean waves sounds on my phone. I've got an app. So just knowing what those things are for you, practicing, write them a little sticky, put it on your computer, or do yourself a little written plan that you've got ready to go. I don't know how many of you are aware of this book, real self-care, like bubble baths not included, something like that. Dr. Pooja Lakshman. And I love her framing around this. So check out the book if you haven't already, but she says this: real self-care, in contrast, is an internal, self-reflective process that involves making difficult decisions in line with our values. And when we practice it, we shift our relationships, our workplaces, and even our broken systems. So there's both the tending to around that self-compassion framework that we've been talking about. And there's the larger, like, how do I do this in the long term? How do I keep showing up and be here in 10 years? Right? Because I still want to be doing this work. It matters for me and it matters for my kids. So she talks about four things, and I'm just going to touch on them. I encourage you to check out the book if you're interested. One is that compassionate self talk. It really is that element of tuning in. What do I need? I'm doing my best. Here's where I'm at today. You know, a little bit of patience versus judgment for the self. Another is boundary setting. Here's what I can do. Here's what I cannot do. Now, there's a little reality sometimes to the work. We can't always say, I can't take one more client, but we should be able to start to have those conversations with team members like, I'm at my limit. Here's where I feel like I can lean in. Where can you lean in? Can't, like, I'm great with crisis calls, but I can't take one more case management client, or I can't take one more therapy client on Fridays because Fridays is the time I really do that, download of my notes or whatever your thing is. We may not be able to fully dictate our reality, but we should start to be clear around what those boundaries look like for us. Remember, boundaries are not a practice in changing somebody else's behavior, they're a practice in changing our own. So, what does that look like for us, both professionally and personally? If you know, Brene Brown in her latest book kind of talks about, and I'm not going to remember the name of it, but she kind of talks about a period of time like that, sort of in between from work and home. And what does it look like for her to sort of restore herself to be able to then show up for her family? And understanding that's a spoken term in their family around kind of what do boundaries look like for them to be able to show up for each other. Third is identifying your personal values. Are you clear in what it is you value that the organization um, values, and are those things in alignment? Because if you're fighting those things every day, you may not be in the right space, and that's okay. There might be another space that's better for you. It also just may be a conversation. Hey, I'm feeling this internal conflict around X. Is that what we're trying to do here? Is that on purpose? Could we have a conversation about that? Because that relates to this last point around asserting your power. We are in charge of our own reality. And we forget sometimes that we chose to be here, but that we get to keep making that decision. And so, what does it look like not to blow the place up, literally or figuratively, but to say, this piece isn't working for me. Could we talk about this practice over here? I'd like to talk about caseloads, and here's maybe a limit for me, and here's where I can lean in, right? Like, what does that sort of negotiation process look like? Lead out with those conversations. I want to give you just a minute to just kind of journal for yourself. We were going to do a breakout, but I'm not sure we have time. So I'll just give you like 2 minutes to journal for yourself if you got a little notebook close. What would it look like for you to address your own well-being? Maybe you're already feeling like you've got your running practice down. That's a good practice for you. You've got your meditation practice down. Whatever that looks like for you, you're already doing it. But is there perhaps a daily practice of emotional intelligence or self-compassion? What does that look like? Yes, fitting yoga into your schedule. Love it. And again, this is not meant to be like a guilt trip of things to do. But if there's something out there that you haven't yet tapped into that you'd like to, what does that look like? I love these other comments earlier from sitting in the quiet of outside and relaxing music. Thanks for sharing those. Reading, yes. Just unplugging from the phone for a minute. There's a reason why levels of anxiety and depression went up when smartphones became the dominant in our culture. Just got to put them down for a minute. Going for a walk. And what would it look like to even do that in the middle of our workday? The same team member that said, I need you to take care of yourself. We started taking a walk for our supervision every week instead of sitting behind my desk while I was eating fries. We started to walk together. And that was a very simple shift, but we both needed it. It made for a very fruitful conversation. We still got done what we needed to. What are those things you can do in the context of your day? Going to bed on time. Yes, please. Yes. Your own religious or spiritual practice, whatever that looks like for you, that fuels your soul. Love it. Talking with your friend, talking with your people. Observation instead of judgment. Say it again for the people in the back. Moving your body, even just a little bit. I used to be not a good at-home workout person because I just wasn't very motivated, but I'm starting doing more yoga at home with my daughter, and it's been so nice to just stretch just a little bit. I'm not a yogi, but 20 to 30 minutes of stretching can make a huge difference. Yes, don't do work on your lunch break. Snaps and a gratitude practice. This is great, you guys. Keep them going. Mhm. I want to get to this idea of the organizational approach because this is where perhaps we have the opportunity to transform this conversation. This is the what we call the 4 Rs. This comes from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, a program, organization, or system that is trauma informed. One, realizes the widespread impact of trauma and understands potential paths for recovery, that it recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff, and others with the system, and responds by fully integrating knowledge about that trauma into policies, procedure, and practice, and seeks to actively resist re-traumatization. At Trauma Informed Utah, we're having lots of conversations because we've been talking about trauma informed care for 20 years, right? 25 years. And most of us have entered that conversation at the client level. Do I understand the trauma that my clients are bringing so that I can design my interventions and my systems around that understanding so that I can effectively do what I need to do? That's absolutely a piece of the puzzle. But the other part of this that we have not yet nailed is, are we doing this for ourselves? It says staff in here, right? Are we recognizing the signs and symptoms of trauma in staff? Because our staff are our mission delivery system. And if we are not well, the thing does not get done. And so we need organizations that understand that pouring into the staff doing the work. If I can feel what it's like to live in a trauma-informed environment, if I know what it smells like and tastes like and feels like, then I can better deliver it to the people that I'm trying to reach. And we do that through 6 principles: safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, cultural, historical, and gender issues. These are fairly self-explanatory, but I'll just point out a couple of things. One is I bet the majority of us are talking about safety every single day at work, right? We're safety planning. We're talking about safe environments. We're talking about safe systems and safe people. But I really love the way the Anders Institute talks about safety because they break it down in 4 different ways. This was Dr. Sandra Bloom's work, if any of you are familiar with her. She talks about it in 4 different ways because it gives us more nuanced language. When somebody says, I don't feel safe, we've got to know what the root of that thing is because safety is a huge concept. So 4 different areas. One is physical. That's the one we're most familiar with. Is my physical environment safe, right? It's the one that's kind of most clear in being able to address. The second is psychological. And I like this distinction. Psychological safety is kind of a buzz term right now, especially in corporate America. But psychological safety is, do I feel safe here? Do I feel safe within myself? Do I know where my trigger points are? Do I have awareness and tools and resources to be able to address them? Do I have permission at work when I'm feeling triggered that I can step out for 5 minutes or that I do have tools and resources available to manage my own stuff? Now, if I have tools and resources to manage my own stuff, and so do you, now we come together for social safety, which is the third area. So if we can bridge that together, then we both have psychological safety and social safety. But social safety is really hard to create if we ourselves are not managing our own stuff, if we're bringing our own stuff into the environment that doesn't have resources to address. Thanks for the resources. Keep them coming. The fourth area is moral safety. Do I feel safe enough to raise my hand in a power filled environment, because we can't really erase power, and say, we have a problem here? There's something going wrong. I have some potential ideas of how to address it, but this is happening and we need to address it. So I really like that distinction, because safety has become such a buzz term right now. And people are saying, I don't feel safe, which has also sort of translated into, I don't feel comfortable. And so then it becomes an excuse to bow out. And really, there's a distinction. And we want to get clear about what that distinction is so that we can actively address it. Um, these others are fairly self-explanatory, but I'll just say this too. Peer support needs to be intentional. It's not just the I bumped into my bestie and we're going out after work. It's, are there regular periods of time where I can come together with my colleagues, not to talk about the cases, not to talk about the clients or the kids that we're trying to serve, but to talk about how this work feels. This is how I've experienced this month. This is what's been hard. This one case is keeping me up at night. Peer support needs to be really intentional. I will never forget the moments in my career where I have advocated for the removal of a child have stuck with me, because I'm not sure I've taken anything more seriously than that, a separation of a child from their parent. And I remember one time where we had gone through all of the things, and I still believe it was for the best of this child, the safety of this child, that needed to happen, but it didn't mean it was easy for any one person involved. And it was about 8:30 at night, once we had kind of gone through all of the steps, and my supervisor said, let's go, come to the table. Nobody's leaving until we take some time to talk this through, about how that felt, because she didn't want us to go home and go to bed with it. And so it wasn't just a breakdown of the case, it was, how did that feel for you to do that? That was a lot, right? So you've got to be intentional about that. Empowerment, voice, and choice is about uplifting in the center of the design of all that we do people's lived experience. So it's both our clients in terms of their experience of how they're experiencing this work and what they need, but it's also staff. We often do these annual staff surveys and we go, oh, that's interesting. And here's a couple of themes. And then we put it in a drawer and we sort of keep going, instead of, what do we actually do? How are our staff actually experiencing this environment? What does that look like? Are we actually working together? Are we just saying that we're working together? Have we addressed the elements of power in our own structure? Our supervisor says they have an open door policy, but sometimes forgets that the open door means you can go both ways. So are they really understanding what it feels like to do this work on the front lines? All of those pieces. And that cultural, historical, and gender issues is about identity. Do I feel safe enough to be my full self here? Do I feel received? Can I bring my best to this environment? So this is the goal, the destination. And this maybe gets a little bit more granular when we're talking about what we feel like is an organizational ethical responsibility to address these things. Peer support, again, intentional and designed. It could be a monthly meeting, it could be a quarterly meeting. It's peer led. So power structures are we've done our best to kind of minimize them in the space. It's the, here's how I experienced the work this month. Regular supervision, time that's protected, not usually the first meeting to get canceled, right? With a supervisor that has both the mental and the physical capacity to show up for their people, the training to be able to do that well in this work. That space needs to be protected. It can be individual, it can be group, but it needs to be routined and protected. Training in an ongoing way, both in workshops like this one, but also for you individually. And if you need something that you're able to say to your supervisor, I could really use some more stuff over here. I'm kind of struggling with this particular CBT tool, right? I need some more support. Caseloads are regularly addressed. Sometimes they're going to be big. Sometimes we may not be able to impact that. But is that the norm? Or is that just because so and so's on maternity leave, so we're all kind of filling in to help cover some extras? So those need to be an active discussion, because you're also talking about capacity. And because we're human, team members may have more or less capacity based on different moments in their lives. And those are decisions that can be made by a team together, how you're sort of managing that. Organizational culture and supports are clearly defined, clearly intentionally addressed. They're not sort of accidental. And I know the environments in which most of us work there, again, under-resourced, overstretched, but we've got to decide how we want this to feel. And we've got to decide and intentionally act to ensure that we are reflective of those values. Here are some kind of specific tools or just suggestions. And then I'd love for you to lean in around yours. So think about some of the ways in which your organization might already be doing some of those things. One is just that organizational practice of emotional intelligence. I talked about the Take Five plan, and I'd be happy to share any of these tools with any of you if you want to email me after. We also had one that every single meeting we opened was something called the community meeting. This comes from the sanctuary model of trauma-informed organizational practice. Every single meeting, we ask three questions. How are you feeling? What is your intention for this meeting or for the day? And who can you ask for help, or what does support look like for you? Which is really just that. It's that organizational practice of emotional intelligence. We're making it normal for us to talk about how we're actually feeling today. And the intention is not how I'm feeling, but how I want to feel. How do I want to show up for you all? And what does support look like for me today? Let's normalize the answers to those questions. The second is around acknowledging individual and organizational loss. I'm a believer, again, some of this teaching comes from the sanctuary model. And I've done a lot of my own kind of research around this. I'm a believer that so many of us helping organizations are steeped in grief, not just because the clients that we're working with are, we're literally losing lives because of the nature of the work that we do. But the other part of that is that we're constantly losing funding. We're constantly losing staff members. We're churning leaders. We can't hang on to good people. We're closing a program because we lost funding. Like, we're constantly in change mode, and we are rarely looking back to grieve and to put down what was so that we can make room for what's to come. So, what is that kind of organizational practice, both in I lost this client and here's how that felt, and also we lost this program and I loved that program. And really what that kind of regular routine looks like. And it could be something as simple as every quarter in a staff meeting, we say, what are we missing? What are you missing? Or what are you still holding on to that you can't put down? Safety infused supervision, which is really that kind of model of reflective supervision or whatever works in your world, but it's about a safe relationship with your supervisor that you have the ability to break down. Intentional opportunities for peer support, we've kind of discussed. And really reflecting all of the things that we've talked about in policy, so that when we're all gone, when we win the lotto and we move to the beach, that the next generation still gets to live like this because we've put it into our policy in terms of how we work. I just want to see what comments we have. Ooh, some of this hits hard. It does. This is big stuff, you guys. And we really want to elevate this conversation beyond the individual. It's me and my organization that needs to care about me, because they need me to keep showing up. And guess what? I want to be here. There's a reason that I'm here. So I want to do, let's do 5 minutes of a breakout session. Actually, you know what? Let's do 8 minutes. We're going to do groups of three or four. And I would love to know maybe what's working that you want to keep doing or build on, that maybe you can share with your group and they can learn from you around what are some of these practices. Here's how we're doing peer support and we're doing awesome. And what's one practice that you could start to influence? Some of you may not feel like you've got a lot of power, you're not a supervisor, but you can show up to your team and say, hey, I've been thinking about this thing. Could we try this? Could we start our team meetings with this question? And see where it goes, right? So I want to invite you. It's 1:10. We're going to go 8 minutes, and then we'll end for any questions or wisdom to be shared. Welcome back, friends. So I'd love to hear from a few of you. If you want to drop it in the chat, if you want to come off of mute, I want to know what's working. What ideas do you guys already have that you're already implementing? Because you may be killing it in some of these areas, and I can learn from you. We can all learn from each other. Who has something that's working around some of these practices that we can share?
Well, I do Reiki, so I do energy work
Ooh,
for my hospice patients, but not only for my hospice patients and families, but for myself. So that's been very helpful.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I want your number.
I will
That's
get,
amazing.
I do it at my house. So if you like a
That's
session,
really cool.
just let me
I
know.
love it. That's awesome. That's a gift that you're giving to
Yes.
others. So thank you for that.
Yes,
That's
yes.
great. Trust, open communication, strong community partner relationships. Let us not underestimate the network in which we do this work and how much we can rely on each other in these moments too. People are eager to be supportive, I think. So thinking about what works for a particular team or group in that particular moment, always, right? Like, what does it look like? And be in conversation with the people. I think sometimes as leaders, we think we've got to have all the answers or fix all the problems, but just that conversation around what do we need this week? What does support look like right now? Yes, Jolie, please.
I was just gonna, you had asked for any thoughts, but
Yeah.
it's too hard to type this quickly.
Yes, let's go.
I had just remembered one thing that an organization I worked for did, and they would gather together for an hour each week and had a self-care hour, which I think was great for the organization together for us to get along and build some collaboration. It also gave us a break in dealing with domestic violence,
Yes.
and just kind of being able to regroup.
Yes.
So that was really helpful. And I remember another time where there was a traumatic event that happened, and the organization allowed each person to kind of individually cope with that in the way that they needed. They came up with a plan about what was needed.
Mhm.
And so I just thought those were great supports that the organization and leadership offered so that we
Love it.
could cope well with the work. So
I love it. Thank you. And just that intentional hour a week that we could all sort of like parallel process, right? While we're caring for ourselves, but it's that felt permission and time from the organization. I love that. Thank you for sharing. Kelly, let's hear it.
So, um, oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, it's breaking up on me. So, in our breakout session, we were talking about, uh, you know, um, in a large setting or a large community, a lot of self-care is that become a sort of service. Um, it, people talk about it, don't really pick it up, and
Mhm.
about what we in that, but not feel defeated by taking on the other. So I shared that in my staff meeting. I do things at the beginning of the meeting for like 5 minutes self care. Um, one that was we close the drapes, turn off the lights. Everyone shuts their eyes and sits there for like 5 minutes and just in total silence. And it was kind of funny because the first few times we did it, there were so many fidgety people. It was like, need to be doing something, need to. So we talked about how do we make an influence at a level that we can influence versus
Mhm.
feeling defeated that you're not affecting the entire people and making it less essentially impacted because that's always we don't always have that capability. We have a capability at our
Yes, I think Kelly, there was a little bit of gap in some of that, but I think I heard um, a lot of that was really just what I heard from you was focusing in on the things that we can, those moments of reflection at the beginning of team meetings, of kind of meditation and sort of quiet and stillness. I loved. So thank you. Those were great suggestions, and I can also see the stuff in the chat as well, starting with wins and positives, having self care and well being check in on the agenda. Um, and again, is it that shift in conversation around, okay, we're going to give you a little bit of time for you to take care of you. And, what is that sort of collaborative take care process? What does that self-compassion process look like as a community? What does it look like to sort of tune in to fierce self-compassion as a community? What do we actually need today? We've suffered this huge crisis or loss last week. What does our organization need right now? Let's take a moment to pause and reflect on that and then do it together, right? So I love all these suggestions. Thank you for sharing. If you have more, keep them coming in the chat. I wanted to just share two other quick things with you. This idea of reinforcing resilience really comes from community. The research suggests that resilience comes through and with community. It is not something we can do in isolation, right? My son's ability to come through that broken leg, he could not have done it himself, and nor could I as his mother. We were surrounded by people that were bringing us things that he could do and food and helping my other child, with rides and, all of the things, right? We do this life in community, and we have to do this work in community. This work of reinforcing resilience, of curating resilience belongs to all of us, both individually and organizationally. And I love this quote from Brene Brown. We desperately need more leaders who are committed to courageous, wholehearted leadership and who are self aware enough to lead from their hearts rather than unevolved leaders who lead from hurt and fear. I love that. And if any of you do not identify yourself as a leader, what I would suggest is you are, in fact, leading people through this human journey that we're all on. You are holding hands and leading people through hard times. So may we show up with an element of self-awareness, of heart, of courage and compassion to do that work. And to be able to keep doing that to be able to keep showing up in that way, we have to know when we're struggling and we have to know what to do with it, right? So I know I just shared some thoughts and wisdom. That was a lot. And I would love if any of you have, questions or wisdom to share as well. Please. Was that somebody coming off chat? Oh, or maybe not. Does anyone in the room have any questions about anything I shared? Sources I'm happy to share after, or wisdom that you'd like to share with the group around your discussions before we close out. And while we do that, I'm just going to take it to that final slide. I still want to hear your comments, but I'll just leave this up here for a minute. This is how you could reach us at Trauma Informed Utah. We do workshops like this all over the state. We are supporting organizations in being trauma informed, both through that awareness and education piece and the technical assistance around practical application. So I'd love to be in conversation with you, or if you just want to subscribe to our newsletter to find out what we have coming up, reach out anytime. But please, is there any other thoughts or comments? Yes, let's see in our chat. And there's your survey to receive your continuing ed certificate. So don't forget to do that.
Let me call my husband. He's more in charge of that.
Please, Mitch.
You said, and I'm gonna need to rewatch the recording of this because you said a couple of really, really powerful things about a third of the way through. Like, and I need the verbiage, right? Like, your supervisor asked you if you like, what was it about? Like do you feel joy in your work?
Do you feel joy? Yeah, she said, do you feel joy in your job? And I felt so caught off. Yeah, go ahead.
And then, that though, I don't know. It's interesting to me because what I'm trying to implement is the concept that all of the work we're doing with our clients is the same work we need to be doing with each other.
Yes,
right.
sir.
So I'm in a space in juvenile justice and youth services in Utah where we desperately need, thinking errors corrected and mindset shifts to happen and skill building and self-awareness and and we need that for our clients. And then we go to one of our coworkers or supervisors and they say, well, that's just the way I am. And I'm like, well, that doesn't hold up anywhere in our work. So why does it hold up here? So I love just the phrases that you gave of, then the other one that you supervised, that he said, we need you to do self-care. Like, so I just appreciated those. Like, I need about 6 or 8 of those kind of phrases and questions and concepts that really cut through all of the bullshit
Mhm.
and try to get people to remove their ego and, remove their doubts or whatever,
Yeah.
they're overcompensating for whatever it is,
Yeah.
and like cut to the heart of something so that we can get somewhere,
Mhm.
because we're not, in a lot of times we're
Yes.
not getting anywhere. So thanks for
Yes.
letting me say that. I appreciate it. And thanks for those, deep, that the questions that you've been posed with. I really
Yes.
appreciate that.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it, Mitch. And I'd love to chat if you want to. You're driving, so please be safe. But if you want to reach out over email, like let's chat because I may have some other tools. We do a lot of work with juvenile justice, and I'm so
Yeah.
with you that this conversation has to start with ourselves. I cannot give my client something that I do not have for myself. So if I'm asking them to have insight and be able to be emotionally intelligent and to be able to have these skills to human, I gotta show up. And we're
Yeah.
not always thinking like that. Like we're very quick to go, those people over there really got to solve that thing that they're dealing with, you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd
And
love
it's
to chat
amazing
further.
how it's amazing how reluctant people are to apply what they teach about everything else, communication, DBT, skills,
Yes.
whatever, apply it to their team or themselves. So
100%. Yes. Well, good. Thank you for saying that. I'm so glad it resonated.
yeah, thank you.
I know we're up against our time. I see your comments in the chat. Thank you all so much for participating. And don't forget to fill out your survey to get your continuing ed certificate. And Erin, I think we're good.
Hey, thank you so much, Carrie. This was wonderful. Really appreciate your time and expertise in joining us today. And I hope everyone has a good Friday. We'll see you next month.